The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Witting. Our return guest today is Sharon Milliman, who we first interviewed on NDE Radio back in April 17th and again on the 24th of April, 2017. You can find those shows on our website by hitting the Past Shows button. Sharon is the author of A Song in the Wind, a near-death experience, and since that time she's had another quite different NDE, quite different from her first three. Sharon was born in Ohio as the middle daughter of three girls. She has two adult daughters and lives in West Virginia. After retiring from her job in banking, Sharon became involved with the foster care program and has volunteered for many years at area hospitals and churches. She also spent several years as a home health caregiver, caring for her parents, specifically her mother, who passed away from end-stage Alzheimer's. Sharon has had 4 near-death experiences. The first occurred at the age of 13 when she drowned while taking swimming lessons. In 2005, she was struck by lightning while talking on a cordless phone. During her NDE, Sharon went to heaven and was greeted by her 2 brothers who had died as babies. She had a life review and saw and spoke with Jesus. And after her conversation with Jesus, he walked her to a wooded glen where she sat and talked with God. They had a very lengthy conversation where much love and wisdom was imparted. Sharon's third near-death experience happened on November 3rd, 2016, while she was undergoing emergency surgery, which she'll be describing to us today. And then a fourth NDE, quite different from the others. Sharon has written a book about her experiences titled A Song in the Wind, a near-death experience. Sharon, welcome to NDE Radio.
Hi, thank you very much.
It's good to have you back again.
Oh, thank you.
Sharon, it's been more than a year since you described your first 2 NDEs for our audience, and including that amazing conversation with God. Let's begin this show with your third NDE.
Okay. My third NDE happened in November 2016, and I had been really sick for a long time with adhesions in my stomach, and it caused a bowel blockage. And so I had made many trips to the emergency room and had lots and lots of tests, and they couldn't seem to, because you can't see adhesions on tests. So anyway, here was this night happened, and my husband took me back to the emergency room, and there just happened to be a surgeon there that night, and he said that, yes, it was a bowel blockage. It was causing all the horrendous pain and sickness. And while I was there, he said he had a emergency surgery to do before mine, so I had to wait. So I was laying in this room, and I saw an angel walking down the hallway, and the angel kept looking at me, and I thought that this angel was the angel of death, and I don't know what made me think that, but they had moved me to another room as my surgery got closer, and the angel actually came into my room and said, "Well, don't mind me. I'm just here to help out." It was kind of, I was like,
that must be scary.
Yeah. So anyway, they finally came for me for my surgery, and while I was on the table, my spirit came up out of my body, and I was kind of floating in the corner of the room, and I could see down. I looked down, and I could see the surgeons, the hats that they were wearing, and their gloved hands that were in me, working on me. And so I'm kind of sitting up in the corner of the room, and then there was this rainbow-colored light that I just went up through this rainbow-colored light and started moving very fast. And I ended up back in heaven again where I had been before, and I recognized everything. But this time I was standing next to the golden wall that surrounds the glorious city. And this wall is very tall and very solid, and it is pure gold. So I'm standing there, and I'm thinking, now how can I jump this wall? I want to get over this wall. And it never dawned on me to just walk a couple feet down from where I was, and there were the gates. They were open. And there was this beautiful meadow in front of me, and it had tall grass and beautiful wildflowers of every color. And the colors were so vibrant and rich, and the air was just really sweet from all the flowers. And it was like a spring day is how it felt. It was warm, and the sun was out, but it was really beautiful. And so I'm looking at this meadow, and I could see on the other side of the meadow there was a fieldstone wall that had pink roses that grew up and over it, and that was in my second NDE. I recognized it. And then I looked a little bit beyond that, and I could see the garden where I had been before. And I recognized it, and there were lots of people, hundreds of people coming out of that garden and walking through the meadow. And while that was happening, there was this little brown and white beagle puppy at my feet, and he was wiggling all over, and he barking, and he wanted me to pet him. So I leaned down, and I was petting him and rubbing his tummy, and he was just so cute and roly-poly and healthy and pudgy, and he was just adorable. So while I was playing with the puppy, I looked back at the people coming out of the garden, and there were, men and women and children, all races, ages, sizes, all traditions. There was a couple of men from the Middle East, and I could tell that that's what they were from because they were wearing robes, and they had, hats on their heads. And they were talking with each other. But every single person that came out of that garden had an angel with them, and the angel was bigger and more illuminated and was wearing a blue and white robe. And there was another man that I saw, and he looked like he was maybe from New York or something, and he still had a hard hat on, and he was carrying tools in a vest that he was wearing. And then these people were just coming out, and they kept going into the city. And I could hear, in the city, music playing. It almost sounded like carnival music or party music. And I heard dishes clanging and people talking, so I knew that there was some big festive occasion that they were preparing for. But there were two other men that came into my view, and one of them, I knew him from pictures that I had seen from a friend of mine on Facebook. It was her son who had died years ago. And there was an older gentleman with him, and I figured out that was his father. And when they walked up to me, I said, "Well, I know you." And he just smiled and walked into the city with the older gentleman. And I was told after they went into the city, I was told that I was going to have to come back, that it wasn't my time. But I knew that the man and his son were together and that they were okay. Well,
now, who did you just sense that you were going to have to go back, or did you hear a voice?
It was like having a giant IV bottle of knowledge. It was divine knowledge. It was like I didn't hear a voice, but I was been given this answer that no, it's not your time. You're going to go back. But seeing these people and the puppy and all of it is very important. And I was like, no, I don't want to go back.
No, it's interesting. You were outside of the city, and yet where you had that conversation in the last NDE with Jesus and with God, that was outside of the city too. That was in that grove.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was outside the city.
Yeah. Interesting.
So
okay, so go
I
on.
don't know. It's always that wall. I couldn't get over that wall, and I guess that's a barrier. I guess my barrier for me. I guess to keep me from having to come back all the time.
Well, that's it. People see barriers. They know if they cross, they're not going to come back. And sometimes it's described as a wall, and sometimes it's a doorway, and sometimes it's almost like crossing a line, that means at that point, your life is over. And so that wall, I guess that's what that golden wall represented to you.
Yeah, because I've seen it in the second near-death experience, and then I'm standing right next to it in the third, and it's so big and so thick, and I can't get over this wall if I try. So as I went further, I did see a beautiful building, and this building was made of had columns and archways, and there were two huge ornate doors, one in the front and one in the back. And there was an angel that stood at each of the doorways, and they held on to keys. And you couldn't get in that building unless the angel allowed you entry, and by unlocking the door using these keys. Mm-hmm. But I went in, and once inside, I saw that there was nothing inside this huge room but a large podium, and sitting on the podium was a huge golden book. And this book was like alive. There was a light that came out of the book, and it just illuminated the whole room. And I noticed that the paper inside the book was made of a material that I don't think I've ever seen before. It was like a tightly woven cloth. And the book was open, and the writing in the book was made of gold. The whole book was gold, but the writing on the pages was gold, and it was in a language that I didn't know, some kind of symbols or ancient script. But the angel didn't talk to me. He didn't say anything while I was looking at the book. So I was not going to get my questions answered by this angel. He was just staring ahead, watching, keeping watch over. But I think that when I read the book, it wasn't to my page, and that's the reason why I couldn't understand what the writing was at all. And after a time, we went out into the courtyard, and the only thing the angel said to me was to read the book of life as a gift. And then he left. And then I began getting this infused knowledge again, like using pendulums and computer programs and cards and things like that's not how someone can read this holy book. You can access it through your heart, and it's a gift that's given by God to certain people. Not everybody has that gift. And then after that, I went back into my body. And when I woke up, I was still hooked to all these machines, and there was a nurse standing next to my bedside. Well, later that day, when I was well enough to be taken to my room, I received a message from another friend who told me that the woman whose pictures that I had seen, who passed a long time ago,
yes,
she had lost her husband that day while I was in surgery. And that was the man that I had saw him with. And I also talked with my daughter and found out what the puppy situation was. And she told me that they had to call the police on a neighbor who lived down the street from them because the neighbor was seen beating his beagle puppy to death. So he had been arrested for that. And when I told her that the puppy was there and that he was fine and that we will see our pets, pets go to heaven, we do see them, and that that little puppy was just as cute as could be, and he was healthy and whole, and it wasn't hurting anything. And that really helped her. So
And and that story will help everyone that worries about where their pets go when they die. And non-pets, I'm sure animals, all life is infused with God, winds up in the eternal.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
When you saw the men in turbans and so forth, did you take that to be a message that not only Christians go into the gate, through the gate into the holy city?
Yes. It's not just God made everybody. It's not
exactly
just man-made religions or man-made terms or whatever. He made everybody, and everybody it's home for everybody.
So is your assumption then with the music and the clatter of dishes and so forth that our lives go on pretty much as they were, but in a much happier setting? And because it's interesting, the spiritual encounters and even the Book of Life are outside of the Golden Wall in your NDE, but life goes on once you cross through the gate.
Yeah. It does. And I noticed it's quite similar to some of the things that bring us joy here, we experience there. And only with a much more heightened awareness, because you don't have the filters that we have when we're on Earth. So things are so much more beautiful, so much more vivid, and the love that you feel is so huge that there's not really words to describe it. And so everyone that I saw was joyful and happy. There was no sadness. The two Middle Eastern men, they looked like they were friends. They were talking and laughing together. Mm-hmm. And the children that I saw were kind of skipping and running along, and even the animals are happy. The birds are singing joyfully. It's just like such a magnificent place. I didn't want to leave.
Now, with the people that were coming, and you said hundreds of people, and each had an angel, more or less like a guardian angel, but large beings. Do you suppose they had all had experienced a conversation with God as you had? It could be multidimensional. Hundreds of people could be having conversations with God all at the same time. But that recognition that you had in your second NDE that, God asked you the question, what would you do if it was just me and you? Right. Establishing that we're all so connected that you, at that moment, were representing the creation. I mean, he was having a conversation with the whole creation because you were connected with everything else, and God was in you, and God was in everything. It's a very powerful image, and I hope everyone will go back to our show, our first interview where you discuss that so in such detail. But do you suppose all those people, those hundreds of people coming out, had just had that same revelation that you'd received?
I think so. I really do. Because that seemed to be a receiving area. And God seems, from my experience, God is right there, and he receives every soul that comes in there and has his conversation with them. And I believe, yes, to answer your question, yes.
Now, with your health problems and with the cares and woes of the world, in your book you mentioned times of depression. Even with these revelations, even with these experiences, it's certainly possible to get depressed, isn't it?
Yeah, I do. And people tell me I shouldn't, but there's such a vast difference between heaven and earth, and sometimes it's hard to live. Life gets tough. It's, relationships are complicated, and there's money issues, and there's, health issues, and there's lots of things that can bring you down. And you would think that once you've been in heaven, you'd stay up all the time, but you don't.
Yeah. Do you think maybe it's the contrast with when you see what the possibilities are for happiness and joy and love, and then you're back here where it's just a shadow of that a lot of the time?
Yeah, I was in shock after my second near-death experience. I had stayed in that oneness with God for like 6 months after, and I was so happy all the time and up and vibrating so high. I mean, I guess you can't see the face of God and not vibrate, not glow along with him. And I brought that back with me for about 6 months, and then it kind of settled in, and I was in shock. I mean, it was like, living Earth is so different. It's so hard. It's like walking in mud, compared to a life in heaven. You're flying free, and you don't. I don't know. There's no oppression, no darkness at all. And when people are depressed, there is oppression, and they can get into a dark place in their hearts and in their minds, and it seems like it's dark everywhere. But
in our second show, you talked about that time when there was almost a demonic person in your backyard, and something very weird was going on in your house.
Yeah.
What's your understanding of evil? Because you did ask God, there are people who do bad things. Are you in them too? And God said yes.
I think my understanding of evil is that it's a created being. These are created beings just like we are. And for whatever reason, and I don't know the mind of God, so I can't tell you why. The old stories say that it's fallen angels and so forth, but I wasn't there, so I didn't see that. But I do know that there is evil, and it is very real, and it can get into people's lives that through mental illness or drugs or drinking or people messing around with Ouija boards and don't realize what they're doing and that kind of thing. It takes almost like it takes advantage of people to try and get into their lives, and selfishness and bitterness and anger and all of those things come from these evil, they don't want us to experience the joy of the total union with God. So they slip in and put these little thoughts in our heads they use our mind like a battlefield, and they put these thoughts in our heads that tell us that we're no good, that God doesn't love us anymore, we can't witness that power of his love, we're not worthy, and things like that. And those negative thoughts come from the evil that's out there. And it's almost like there's a battle for our souls. They want to take as many down as they can. And I know a lot of people don't believe that, but when I saw that being out in my yard that was so evil and so real, God was teaching me how to discern spirits, and he was saying, yes, this is real, and you need to tell people that this stuff is real, and they can call on me and I will help them get through those dark times and when the devil's around you or the evil one is around you. You call on God and he's there, and you don't have to fight it by yourself.
Yeah. Did you, when you asked him if he was in people who had fallen, let's call it that, and he said yes, because of course he's in everything that's created.
Exactly.
Did you ask him why he'd created evil? Was there any kind of indication about Was it done as a challenge, as a learning lesson for us? Or is it a way to sort out our own spirits? Was there any reason given by God?
I honestly didn't ask. My dad used to tell me when I was a little girl, why don't you ask questions more? Why don't you question more? Well, because God said it was so it's so. I don't have to ask questions. So he told me that this was real, and I didn't question his authority. I didn't question, okay, why did you do that? That's a stupid thing to do. So no, I did not ask that question, but I just know that in my life I have come across evil, and so I know that it's real, and I just asked Jesus to take it away.
Yeah.
And
well, I think that's probably a good answer, because one thing that people who've had NDEs often say is, I had the feeling that all of my questions, all of the things that I'd had doubts about, were answered while I was on the other side. And so if you have that feeling that all your questions, everything makes sense, that it all makes sense actually, then those questions would actually disappear.
Yeah, and I did have that. Both times I was there, I had that. It felt like I was being infused, like a giant IV bottle of divine knowledge, So I really didn't, and it did make sense to me. But I come back here, and it's like, really? Why can't I remember all the intricate details and every little word that was said? And, like I remember so much, and then,
And then there was the Book of Life. Now, did you think that was simply a list of the people who get into heaven, or was it like a font of all knowledge and wisdom? Was it like the Akashic Record?
Yes, that's exactly what it was. And it was every soul that had ever lived was in that book. And it was a living book. And it was because we are living souls. We're not just, every person is a soul, and every person has a spirit. So every person that was ever born was in that book. Every person that was ever thought of, whether they lived or died as babies or before birth or whatever, but every soul was in that book. And that's what I knew it to be. And that was not on my page, so I couldn't read whose life it was that was in front of me. It was none of my business.
Yeah, but what that implies is that the universal salvation, because if your name is written, if all names are written in the Book of Life, then we all ultimately can go through that gate. Yeah.
That's the good news.
That's a really good news.
Go through that gate. And there's going to be a welcoming party for every single person that he's ever created, because that's what his love does.
Yes. Well, Sharon, we're out of time, and we haven't even gotten to your fourth NDE, and I'm wondering if you could come back next week and we'll round it out.
I would be honored. Thank you so much.
It worked before. It should work again. And your this last NDE I'm very interested in, because even though it's a very simple story, it's got profound implications. Anyway, take a few seconds and tell people how they can get your book.
My book is A Song in the Wind, The Near-Death Experience, and it's on Amazon, and you can go there and order it.
Very good. Very good. I hope they do. It's really good. And it doesn't have the fourth NDE, so even if they buy the book and read it before next week, they'll have something new to hear about.
Well, my
next
third
Monday.
Or my fourth is not in there. My first two are in there, and I'm working on a sequel to it that will have this third one that I just told you, and then the fourth one will be in there too. So,
all right.
Once I get that done.
Well, thanks until next week, Sharon.
Okay,
thank you for sharing your story thus far. If the audience would like to listen again to this or any of our past shows, just go to our website at nderadio.org. For more information about the work of IANDS and our upcoming conference in Seattle, check out that website, IANDS.org, and tune in next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for more NDE Radio. This is Lee Witting saying thanks for listening.